Firstly, thank you for having me today. It's an incredible honour to be considered for this award. I'm Hannah Stringer. I joined AOC Architecture in 2016, becoming an associate last year. In terms of context, I wanted to start with these two projects, the Green Community Centre and the Reading Rooms at Wellcome Collection. They'd recently opened when I joined AOC, or recently been completed. And I think it's fair to say they've had a really strong influence on the kind of subsequent trajectory of projects, certainly that I've worked on, which is to say kind of the making of public spaces and approaches to engagement and an institution's collections. Since joining AOC, key projects I've delivered are the National Archives phased redevelopment, Somerset House Exchange, and a contemporary co-working studio within the greater listed building, and Southwark Heritage Centre and Walworth Library. I'm also currently working on a locomotion and new collection buildings for the Science Museum group at the National Railway Museum's locomotion site in Shildon, Durham. Themes across this work are very much helping in public institutions engage with diverse publics, making their collections available and relevant, and ways of working, like what kind of places work and learning might happen in. I wanted to start with the National Archives and go on to Southwark briefly. The archives are located in Kew, just south of the River Thames in Richmond. The site is comprised of the original 1977 Q1 building, which you see on the left, and the 1996 extension and connecting link. The majority of the public spaces are located across 7,000 square metres within the ground and first floor of Q1. On opening, Q1 was a state-of-the-art archive building. It's a really, really deep plan, a kind of chamfered cube in plan, and a very kind of concrete bunker-like in appearance. What's incredible about the archives is anyone can access the records and hold physical documents here in the reading room. What's challenging from a visitor experience point of view is outside of that, the documents need to be stored. The client directive at the archives is Archives Inspire, so a kind of key priority of that is to allow more events to happen in more spaces with increased flexibility. These ISOs show the overall master plan proposals, and our works to date have been carried out as parcels within that structure. They are the public restaurant, the event space and embedded learning room, and subsequent embedded learning rooms, one within the document reading room and one within the research spaces. This plan shows the archives as they are today, with our constructed works picked out in colour. So that's the cafe works on the ground floor, which takes you up via the public stair to the first floor, where you have the event space and the two embedded learning spaces. The fragment of the section through Q1 shows the existing and proposed, and shows how the event space and the cafe are going to play with the ceiling level and the floor levels within that. Oh, and there we go. The designs, in terms of the approach to the historic building, the designs interrogate what's there and what used to be there. The building's on a 9.6 metre square grid of what used to be, you can see in those photos, exposed concrete columns. And we knew that the ceiling, above the ceiling, there was a coffered concrete soffit. The accumulation of additions over time, this is the space when we arrived, kind of muddied the character of those spaces with sort of lots of plasterboard wrappings and low suspended ceilings. The intent was to strip that back, reinforce the legibility of the grid, and introduce a richer material character and greater spatial variety to encourage that ambition for more variety of uses. The worm's eye shows the soffit exposed, with services rationalised into a suspended downstand that sits 2.4 metres above floor level, and all within one structural bay. Within it, it creates kind of playful geometries, and it's covered in a recycled plastic felt, which gives a softness against the concrete and some acoustic absorption. The works are strategic about the intensity of intervention. So in this case, it's really in the ceiling where we focused that. And then moving upstairs, The client brief required an event space with a degree of flexibility to go from 150 people to 250, and they had an earlier feasibility that looked at locating this in the new building. From our work downstairs, we knew that the ceiling void gave us enough height for a raped auditorium. That's allowed for reuse of the existing space as it was before, rather than a new building, and helps the ambition of bringing in different uses, that kind of intensity of types of users, types of engagement, and the kind of adjacencies between them. And how we achieved that was to enclose the space in double glazed partitions that sit below that same 2.4 meter datum of the felt down stands. The glass allows for noisy events to happen adjacent to the research areas, but also borrowed daylight, but the ability to control that with blackout curtains. They all sit within that column grid, and you have the rectangular auditorium and the square learning space, which can open out into a L-shaped 250 space. The first learning space was kind of a prototype for a series of learning rooms. So this one is really special in that it sits within the document reading rooms, which are the tables that you can see in front of it there. It's special, particularly as kind of school groups don't really get to experience the document reading rooms, is that there's a controlled space. The ceiling is a backlit, stretched ceiling that gives kind of a feeling of height and really even controllable light coverage, as well as acoustic absorption. And then the third extends out to the perimeter window on the west side of the building. And the wave of the ceiling improves acoustics. Again, is lined in the same felt, and it has these incredible views over the park, but also a double curtain with the ability to control solar gain. It's worth saying all of those spaces are, in terms of specification, are suitable for original documents, so they can host workshops in these spaces with documents. So those activities can happen outside of the traditional document reading room. And then just an overview there, if it's worth saying that the long-term nature of how these have been delivered has been able to keep the building operational, but has also kind of enabled an iterative testing of the brief and relationship with the client that's a continuing conversation with them. And then Southwark. In 2019, we were appointed to deliver a new home for Walworth Library and Southwark Heritage Centre for Southwark Council in partnership with Lend-Lease. The site is a 590 square metre ground floor unit of a new residential block on the Walworth Road. The brief was for a public library, a permanent and temporary exhibition space, incorporation of Southwark's own extensive museum collection, and a public lounge and a kind of heritage activity workshop space. Our approach was to rationalise the space, condensing support along the back, giving a better defined form to the public spaces. And the library stock is located along the front, using those really big shop front windows to frame public spaces and make the most of the daylight. A step back away from this are the exhibition spaces. And then steps extend out into an informal kind of event space. And the form of that mezzanine kind of juts in over the space, creating an undercroft that allows for more control of light levels, particularly to the permanent collection below. An unheated new lobby structure creates a kind of generous front door onto Walworth Road, but also a double airlock to the space. And then above, just showing the kind of desks wrapping the mezzanine to provide quiet study up on the mezzanine floor. The museum element of the brief is sort of threefold. So there's the permanent exhibition space, the temporary space for changing shows, which is sort of defined by the mezzanine form, and then the embedded collection, which is distributed through 30 passively conditioned museum grade cases. They're located within the book stock, and the curation of each relates to the adjacent book genre. I guess at the National Archives, we've talked a lot about opportunities for serendipitous encounters with the collection as kind of key to enabling broader engagement for non-experts. I guess the hybrid function at Walworth Library really takes that opportunity, actually making the process of learning more available to passers-by. And then just finishing with some views into the library. So that's kind of looking into the children's library and then through the ground floor bookstock. And that's just to the side of the mezzanine, looking at the full height, looking at how the Story of Southwark exhibition uses the full height space for display and for exhibits. And that's me, thank you.